All right. Good morning, everybody. We started Matthias yesterday, so we got to the top of Chav Beis Amud Aleph. We're still discussing the case of Yeush Shalamidas, right? Yeush Shalamidas is basically a situation where a person ultimately has Yeush, but he doesn't know it yet. But right, he does not know it yet. He didn't realize it yet. However, the item was already picked up. So if the item was picked up at noon and he only realized at 2:00 that it's gone and I don't care anymore, it's the I have Yeush. So the question is, the guy who picked it up at 12, can he keep it or not? According to Abaye, he cannot, because Abaye said Yeush Shalamidas lo have Yeush, and Rabba says no, it is Yeush. So now we're continuing and trying to find a source for one of the sides. So let's see. Tashma, come and listen. 6 lines from the top on Chav Beis Amud Aleph. Hey. And away we go. Tashma, come and listen. Shataf na karav eitzav avana v'nasam b'sech tzedech haveru. The river overflowed and it took maybe beams from a property or wood or stones and it displaced it into another field. Hare elu shalo, that person can keep it because the owners have had Yeush already. The reason is because they openly saw it go ahead and go and get swept away, and they had Yeush. Stama. But if they didn't, it wasn't these Yashabayim lo. They would not. So you see, the Yesh Lamidas is not. In other words, only Badafka they had Yeush. But if they didn't have Yeush yet, it doesn't work.
So they saw the river.
In other words, they saw they right. It was only specifically if they had Yeush. They said Nisiyashu Abayim. They said we have Yeush, right? So, but mashma, if they didn't say we have Yeush, then whoever goes ahead and gets it, can I go ahead and keep it, right? So it's a proof the law of Yeush. The Gemara says no. He can go ahead and save it, and therefore, since he go ahead and save it, that's the reason why there's that's the reason why they can't go ahead and keep it if they didn't openly outright have Nisyash Rabbanim. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, let's take a look at the Sefer. It says, if the owners were chasing down, down the river, they're chasing down the beams or whatever got swept away, you have to go ahead and return it. So Gemara says, but if you're talking about a case where you can save it, my area Miradfin, talking about a case of whether they're chasing after it. Right? Even even they're not chasing it, but they can go ahead and save it, so they don't have Yeush. So of course you can't pick it up. So Gemara says not. So Gemara answers, no, we're talking about a case of they can go ahead and save it, but it will take a lot of effort. So therefore, if they are Miradfin, if they are chasing after it, then you see putting in the effort, then they don't have Yeush. However, a Miradfin, but if they're not chasing after it, they didn't begin, to chase down with difficulty, then then indeed they must have had Yeush. Fine. A third of the way down on Chav Beis Amud Aleph, Tashma, come and listen. So Keitzad Amru Hatayim Shel Midas Truma So Truma. What is the case where we say one takes truma from someone else's property, right? One is supposed to, the Torah does not mandate exactly how much. It's the midah beinus is 1/50th. However, if your peer person's, you go to the Kohanim, person is very generous, he gets a 40th. The person's shtickle miserly, he gets 1/60th. So what is the case of if he takes truma? So if I go into Eddie's field and I take truma for him without telling him, and I give it to the Kohen, what is the case of truma's truma? So if one goes in his friend's yard, I go to Eddie's yard, the likat, and I go ahead and I harvest, I take some v'taram shalom b'shus, and I go ahead and I take without Eddie's permission truma, and I give it to the Kohen. So im chayshish gezel a truma so truma. If the owner does not approve, and therefore is a chashash of gezel, which will soon see the case, then the truma is not good. However, in love, if the owner does allow it, then truma so truma, then the truma is good. So what is the case? And how do we know whether we're chashish of gezel or not? In other words, did Eddie approve of me giving to the Kohen or not? So Eddie comes back, the Balabayas comes back. Umatza, that he founds the person, me, in his yard. V'amar and he saw I gave the Kohen truma, I gave Jack the truma, and he says to me, right? Why don't you take for the nicer ones? So even so, Yafos, if indeed there are nicer crops there, Yafos may add than Shumas or Truma, then it goes Truma. In other words, Eddie was happy that he gave Truma. It says you actually should have given from the better stuff, right? In other words, yeah, giving Truma is a good thing, and therefore he's basically happy. But if not, if Eddie says, why don't you give from the better stuff? And that was the best stuff there. So obviously Eddie's being sarcastic, right? Oh, why don't you give us the better stuff? There is, you gave for the best. There's nothing better than ain't Shuma sa Truma. Then the Truma does not work. Now,
This is after the Gemar Malacha, right?
yeah, this is.
So he took it from the garden,
Well,
from the threshing floor.
Well, even if he harvested it, if he veliktu, right? He cut it off. He took it, right? Right. He took it from the. He took it from the. It was subject to truma, right? The stuff already grew. It was already fully grown.
Yeah, but it's not subject to truma until after you do all that.
No, but you can separate it then. In other words, if you eat, you're talking about the person goes ahead.
When is the truma subject to truma?
Right, when it's the kri, right, when it's put in the pile.
Right.
Yeah. So
okay. So here, Laktu, he just cut it down.
Put it into a pile.
It was subject to truma.
He put it in the pile.
Okay. Right.
So it was already in the pile. And
So
I see
either right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, yes. So he went to the yard without permission. He took truma,
right,
which was
I see you there, and you tell me
right.
I took the truma. Okay, shine.
Right. Well, now, you could take truma before everything is obligated. In other words, the issue of that is eating something that's already subject to truma, and you didn't separate it yet. That's when the bigger issue is, right? Because then, right, you're eating something that is what's it called? You're eating tevel. Right. But you can go ahead, and even though that you can go ahead and give from certain stuff. You cut it and already is. So once you harvest, take away something, it's already, you can give it to something. Usually it gets piled up, so that's when the forbidden is. But at that point, you can still go ahead and give truma. At that point. Anyway.
It's all based on dots, is the bottom line.
So over here, we see that even though he finds out afterwards, right? That's going to be the comparison. He finds out afterwards, nevertheless, it could have worked. His brain, whatever his brain thought afterwards, really has effect on what happened before. Similar concept to Yeush Shlomi Das, right? Ultimately, he's going to have a Yeush, and therefore we say it goes back to the beginning. Ultimately, he's happy that the guy gave Truma, so it goes back from the time of the beginning. And so and let's say the guy went ahead and gave truma, and then all of a sudden, the owner comes along and he adds truma to that. Then you see he approved it. So what's the case? So we go back and let's say he finds that there's better truma, so it is truma. So by the time when he entered the truma, he did not know about it. So Takima Rava, Aliba Dabai, the Shavia Shtaliach. Over here, we're not talking about where I just went to Eddie's yard and took away truma without telling him. Eddie says, Yoel, go ahead and take truma for me. Give it to the Kohen. I'm going to be out of town.
They didn't tell them what kind of truma.
Ah, right. And how can I say it's logical to say, why D? So that's the Shavia Shtaliach. If he say, then you go ahead and Shtaliach. We have a truma so truma. Would the truma indeed be truma of ha-atem? The pasuk says, gamatem. Right, the pasuk says Gamatev. You have to go ahead and give it to Amar Rachman. To go ahead and include that your shlich go ahead and give truma. So matem daschem afshuchechem daschem. Just like when you do it yourself, you have das to give truma. So too the shliach. Anybody who goes ahead and gives it for you has to have das.
The word God is a reboot, is
right,
extra,
right, and therefore the so
therefore
right.
We know that it can be
correct.
Right.
So it says Kain Tarimo Gama Tem Trumas Hashem. Right. So Allah Hachmaiskina could go into Shavi Shli. We're talking about the case we made a Shliach. The Amar Lay, and it's now to Alan's point. Zeal Tarim. He goes ahead and says take Truma. Lo Amar Lay, and he didn't tell him Tarim Mihani. He didn't tell him which ones to take from. The stomach of Balabais. Kitar Mibinanias who two Tarim. Right. And the most the average Balabais gives the normal rate like 2%, 1/50. The Yazal Ihu, he went have it Tarmi Yafos, and he took stuff that was even better. Uba balabais, and the balabais came over. Matzav Yamarle, Klach, it's a Yafos. Then the balabais says, "Oh, why don't you take from the better?" So he means so Yafos. If there are if there are better ones than that, then Shumas Shuma. Then indeed, he was being sincere. He says he should have given from the best to the Kohanim. Lav. If not, ain't Shumas Shuma. Then the Shuma was not good because you see afterwards. But this whole case is talking about he made a Shaliach and therefore was not considered to be Shlomidas. So first by line, Meimar Umar Zutra Ravash equal Bustina Demar Bar Asik. So they went over, and I guess they were at the by the fields by the trees of Mari Bar Isik. So I see Arise, says sharecropper came and he brought, what did he bring them? I see Tamre, very miny, but he took some dates, he took some pomegranates, Vashada Kamai and threw before them. So Mema Ravashi, they said, okay, great. They started eating from the sharecropper. And Marzutra, right, because this is the field of Mari Bar Isik, he didn't go ahead and eat it because he didn't know whether the owner of the field really approved of it. And Haki, meanwhile, also Mari Bar Isaac, Ashkin, they found these three rabbis there. Ramalei, there are Arise. He told the sharecropper, Amailo, I see Lula Rabbanim, Yach why don't you go ahead and take for the best stuff, right? Give the three rabbis the best stuff. So Amalei, Meimar Ravashi, Lamar Zutra, still Meimar Ravashi were chopping away, and Marzutra still wasn't eating. So it says, Hashta, Amailo Yachil, why aren't you eating now? Vatan is going to buy them, eating so Yafos Mehan, Shumas Shuba. Right? If the guy comes back and says, why don't you take from the better? And there indeed is better. So you mean he's being sincere. So the Mari Bar Asik came, he said, why don't you give our guests from the better? So L'chaira, that was done with his approval, and therefore you shouldn't be eating what's before you. So Amalu, he told them, Hachim, my Rav, the Rav said, Amru Kalachetz Yafais Elin and Truma. Only regarding Truma do we say that. Why? The mitzvah, because it's a mitzvah to give Truma, therefore people want to give more. Right? Therefore it's Nichel to give a better mitzvah. Aval Hach over here, Mishum Kesufahu. But over here, it was more maybe because he was confronted with the rabbis were there, and he was embarrassed not to say it. So therefore, he had to say that, right? Truth is also it's a mitzvah here, right? In other words, the mitzvah also
Since here the people are there, so they're
right. So that's more what it is. It's not because the other case also mitzvah. I mean, I was just thinking about it now. That's also mitzvah. He's Achmas right? He's feeding them, right? So, but the difference is over here is that the person, the rabbis in front of them, and therefore because he's embarrassed to say. Why'd you give him, the good stuff? You should have given him the bad stuff. Exactly right. You could have given him the chicken nuggets, right? Would have been okay. So that's the reason why he said, fine, 2 lines to the bottom. Tashma, come listen. Odeo hatal alehem. So there's a halacha, right? For food to be susceptible to tuma, it has to be touched with one of these 7 liquids, and normally it has to be done midas, the owner, right? B'chiyutan, as we'll soon see, the pasuk says. So let's say there is dew from the dew comes automatically. It's from Shemayim, and if the dew is upon the fruit that was out, right? And it's moistened. If it's sameach and he's happy, okay, good. It needs a good washing. It needs a good watering. It freshens it up. Harei ze b'chiyutan. It's considered to be chiyutan as if he placed the water upon the food, and now it's settled to tumah. Because while the dew was on it, he realized and he was happy, right? And Nignavu, however, if it became dry, and then he found that he says, it was wet earlier in the morning from the dew, and now it's dry. He says, it was good, it was wet this morning, even though right now it's 11 a.m., it's not wet anymore. It's not considered to be chiyutan. Because why? The time when it was wet, he did not know about it. I said, so what's the reason over here?
How is Tal ever in the category of Bechin Yutar?
Because it's water. It's considered.
But you didn't put it there,
right? But if he realized, we're saying if he realized it, right, when it was when it was upon it, right, then it's considered like he, as we'll see, then it's considered like he put it there. That's gonna be the drasha. So Raj says the time of my Islam. So therefore, right, just like even right, in other words, that since he was happy with it ultimately, so therefore we say you can go back retroactively and say it's like he put it on, he was happy then, right? And which will be our case of Yesh Shlomidas. We just say Yesh Shlomidas Havi Yesh. The Raj says no. Shani Hasam, the Chsiv ki it says ki yitain, but we learn ad sheyitain. So or was it ki yutan ad sheyitain is a sundarshan, right? Now it's when he places it upon it. So yaki reshanami, right? Well, at the resha, he didn't place it there in the resha. The dew was there, and then he realized that he was happy. Then we say it was like he put it's subject to tuba. So Hasam could have papa. There are papa. Rami see the pasuk says ki yitain, the karina ki yutan. It says kiyutan. So how so? So beinan kiyutan duma de chiyitain. So kiyutan is passive. In other words, that the water is placed on it has to be the same as when you place the liquid on it. Ma yitain, just like when you place it on its ladas, af kiyutan, so too if it's placed on its own, i.e., the natural dew which comes on its own, nami ladas also has to be the das. Fine. So Toshma, come and listen. The Amar of Yechanan, I think this is the final. This is going to be the final one, the proof, the one that does not get deflected. So let's see which way it goes. So Toshma comes from Rabbi Yechanan, Mishur Rabbi Yishmael ben Yahid Tzadok. How do we know that a lost object that was swept away by the river that is permissible to go ahead and keep? The pasuk says, "V'chein." It says, "V'chein taseh l'chamayra." So too should you do to his donkey. V'chein by returning it. V'chein taseh l'simlaso to his clothing. V'samlaso v'chein taseh l'chol avedas achicha, lost object of your fellow man. Asher tavod mimenu umatzasa. Right. That which you go ahead, which is lost to them, and says you find a so what do we dash there? So Misha Shavuda Hemenu Matsuy Eitzakadam. We're saying over there that it was lost to your fellow man, but it was found to others. So Yatzazu Shavuda Mimenu Ve'ena Matsuy Eitzakadam. Right, that would exclude something which was swept away by the river, because it's nobody's. Right, if there's an object on the ground, so it's lost to the owner, but it's not lost to me because I'm standing right next to it. But if something gets swept away by the river, that is something that does not have to be returned, because that is not only lost to the owner, it's lost to everybody. V'isura dumi lehatera, and that which is usher, in other words, that you can't go ahead and keep it, you have to return it, is similar to that which you're allowed to go ahead, the hatera, mahatera, just like the heter case, i.e., something was swept away by the river. The east base simon, the west base simon, whether or not there's a simon on it, since it was swept away, it was lost to all mankind. So therefore, you can go ahead and pick it up. So sharis is permissible. So afi surah, so too something which is usher. If you find it on the ground, you pick it up, right? Bain the east base simon, the west base simon, asura. So too, if you find something, you pick it up, it's usher. Why is it usher? There's no simon. It must be because it's yesh shlomi das. So you see clearly over here the yesh shlomi das lo have yesh. And Tiyufta, the Rava Tiyufta, it's a Tiyufta Rava who says Hava Yesh. The Hilchas and the Lach is Kavasi Debai like Abaye, Beyal Kagam. This is one of the 6 cases where we hold like Abaye, and this is the Yud of Yehush Shalamidas. Fine. Amalei Ravacho, Berei the Ravash, Shivachimiaka, the Sase Rafa. Hani, so after we asked the Kasha and Rava, and we bombed them away, we gave it to Yufta, that we say ultimately lo haviyesh. So Hani Tamri, the Zika, Hechiach, how do we go ahead and eat those dates that fall from the trees? Right? The owner doesn't know about it yet, and therefore it's the Yesh Lo Midas, lo haviyesh. So how so came the Ikashkatz very much, and since there's animals and insects and bugs, the he even has the ears from the beginning because he knows they're going to fall off on the ground, and therefore one can go. It's considered to be like Yehush Midas. So Yasmi the what about it? Let's say it was owned by orphans, right? Orphans can't have Yehush on it, right? So Amalei Bagadara the Yasme Loi Machsakina. Okay, but most places, a large land is not owned by minors, by Yisoimim. So therefore, Mistama, the rove is that it's owned by people, and therefore regular people who can have Yerush. Of course, I muchsach the made my. But what does it say? We know it belongs to orphans, so you can't eat those. Or what about Kraksa my? Or rather, they put a fence around it, right? How can you pick up those? And Echanami right, Asira, those would be aser. Fine. Next case. So we said in the Mishnah, we said krichas b'shus haravim harei elu shelo. One who goes ahead and he finds krichas, there are these small sheaves. You can go ahead and pick those up, scattered around. You can go ahead and pick those up. So I'm a rabba, says rabba, the afibu davar sheish b'siman. Even we're talking about something that has a siman, a sign on it that's identifiable. Why could you pick it up? So Alma Ksaver, Rabba Simon, something which is going to be tread upon, right? There's a simon, but something on the ground is going to be walked upon or kicked around. It's not considered to be a good simon because it's going to go ahead and disappear. And Rav Amar only talking about you can go ahead and pick up these small sheaves if it does not have a simon. But if something does have a sign on it, it's identifiable. Even though it'll get kicked around, you have to go ahead and pick it up and announce it to identify it. So Alma, what do you say there? Rava holds simon simon. Even though something has a sign that's going to be treaded upon, nevertheless, it is still considered to be a good sign. V'ika demasni lahashmaitza be'api nafshi. And some have just this stam instead of this regular case. Just a machlokas beferish between Rab and Rava. Simon hasui lidares. Regarding the matter of something which has an identifiable marker, which is going to be walked upon. So Rab Omar loy havi simon. It's not considered to be a good simon. You can keep it. But Rav Omar havi simon. It's a simon. And tonight we're going to the Mishnah. Our Mishnah is krichas. We're at the larger ones. Right. Our case, the krichos are the smaller ones. B'shusa Rabim. Right. Hare elush shalom. Right. If it's a Rishus Rabim, you go ahead and keep these sheep. For Shusayach, if it's in a private area where only very few people go, no tell machris, you have to go ahead and announce it. Because so what's the case? Eat the lesbo simon. If there's no simon.
Do you think they just leave it?
So it's not. So over here, so it's a good question. So over here, it's not really a real Rishus Yachid. You know, I'm in someone else's backyard and say, "Oh, these are no one's around there." It's right.
Like his backyard.
Right. So we're talking about an area, so which it really is public area, not the location would not be owned by a certain person, but very few people go there, and therefore, since it's not trampled upon as we'll soon see, so therefore it has like the qualities of a Rishus HaYachid. So Gemara says, "Hey, what's the case there? Eat the last simon. If there's no simon, Rishus HaYachid, my machers. What are you going to announce in the Rishus HaYachid? Elav, these simon. It must be a simon. I've never listened. It says Vikatani Rishus HaRabim Harei L'Shalo. It says that even though it has a simon, you can go ahead and keep Rishus HaRabim. Alma, what do you see over there? Simon Hasui Lidares Layavi simon. So you see that something when you tread upon is not considered to be a good simon. With Tiyufta the Rava, it's going to be a kasha and Rava. So Rava, no Rava answers to you. Liyaylam the last who's simon. Really, there is no simon. I become married to Yachid, my macher is what are you going to announce to Yachid? So macher is makom. You're going to announce, I found something in this place, and then people can go ahead and identify, oh yeah, I had small sheaves over there, those are mine. But Rabba Amar, makom, and Rabba says, no, makom loy havi simon. A place, you can't say something is found in a specific location, that's the simon. Ditamar. Because we learned, it says Makkah, when it comes to a place, Rabba Amar lo havi simon, but Rava Amar havi simon. Rabba says just something in the location is not identifiable, and Rava says it is considered a simon. So Tashma, come and listen. So Krichas b'sur. So he say the Krichas b'rishus harabim harei l'shalo. The Krichas that these sheaves that are found in Rishus harabim, we can keep it. Rishus hayachin no tel machris. V'aluma, he said larger ones. Bein Rishus harabim, bein Rishus hayachin no tel machris. The larger ones you have to go ahead and announce. So Rabba Heichim Ataritz, Lava Rabba Heichim Ataritz. So how is Rabba going to go ahead and explain the cases? Because Rabba holds it is be a simon, so why can you keep it? And Rabba, how does he explain the cases where says that you can keep it because the Chayyim should have to announce it? So Rabba Mataritz Atame is simon. Rabba's going to explain. We're talking about a case where this item has a simon, and Rabba Mataritz Atame b'makom was hard a place where the place it was you can identify by the place. How so? So Rabba Mataritz Atame. Rabba says the Shitaso says b'simon. So it says krichos when it comes to the smaller sheaves b'shusa Rabba. If it's in a public way, harei l'shali you can keep it. Why? Mishum demidrasa because people will go ahead and will tread upon it. Right? And B'shus HaYachid, but in a small place, the reason why it's no tel in a B'shus HaYachid, private area with very few people go, the reason why it's no tel machris, you have to announce it to Midrasa, because not a lot of people walk there, won't be trampled upon, and therefore the simon would be a good simon. You even have to go ahead and announce it. However, Balumos, but the larger ones, B'shus HaRabim, B'shus HaYachid, whether it's in an area where very few people go, or even where a lot of people go, no tell machris, you still have to go ahead and announce it. Why? Came in the gabeyan since they're very big and tall, no one's going to step upon it. Therefore, the simon will remain intact. And for Rava, Mataris Atame, Rava says the shitasel his way. So, but Malko, he's talking about where the place is identifiable. So, Krichas b'shus harabim. If there's small ones, b'shus harabim harei l'shalo, they can keep it. Why? The minishach, mean shatfa, because it gets moved around. It gets moved around, and therefore, because a lot of people go there, they're smaller, and therefore you can go. Where it's found is not identifiable because it could have been kicked half a block. And mean shatfa because it's not moved around. But alubas and large ones, then Noitel Machris, you have to pick up and announce it. The larger ones, why? Since they're heavy, therefore they're not going to get moved around, and therefore whichever place you go ahead and find them, that's l'chayra where the person who left in there, who owned it, left in there, or dropped in there, or forgot it there, and therefore you can go ahead and announce, I found in this place. We'll stop here. Yes, if it was large enough that it wouldn't get kicked around. Yes, that's according to Rava. Shkef.